Welcome to the Tanya Acker Show. I had a great conversation with Elana Meyers-Taylor. She is, of course, a world champion bobsledder. She's an Olympic silver medalist. She is a past president of the Women's Sports Federation and has worked very hard and is working very hard to make sports more fair and equitable for women and for all of us. She is a winner, and we talked about her formula for winning. We talked about how you deal with people who are just shameless when they're being wrong. And we talked about a plethora of other things. Here I am with Elana Meyers-Taylor, world champion, Olympic silver medalist, former president of the Women's Sports Federation. Welcome to the podcast, Elana. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me.
You are a competitor. You're a champion. You've won medals. You've made history. Talk to us about winning. How do you win?
That is a loaded question. Well, first, I've been blessed with some God-given talent. Genetically, I had a few things on my side, which definitely helps in athletics and the sport of bobsled. But I think any athlete would agree there is a huge mental component to winning and to being successful. And that goes beyond athletics to any area of life. We've got to have it together mentally in order to succeed. So I've had the benefit of being able to work with some high quality sports psychologists, and also I'm married to the most positive person in the world. So I keep positive people around me, which really help encourage me and help me keep motivated and going after my goals.
You're married to your trainer, who's also someone with whom you've competed. Talk to me about working with your partner.
So my husband, Nick, is on the bobsled team as well. He's on the men's bobsled team. But before he was a bobsledder, he was a track and field coach at UCLA. So he came into bobsled with an incredible wealth of knowledge and expertise. And through the years of competing in bobsled himself, he's also gained the knowledge and expertise on how to coach bobsledders as well as so many other athletes. And he's worked really hard to hone in his skills. And then after the 2018 Olympics, when my strength and conditioning coach decided not to coach bobsledders anymore, it just seemed like a natural fit that my husband would start coaching me. It's kind of funny because as he was still an athlete, he would try out workouts on himself before he passed them off to me. So he was always tinkering and experimenting on himself before he would ever, just try anything on me. And it really made out for a great partnership. And it's kind of cool for me. I get to work with my best friend every single day.
It seems to me that part of your formula for doing well is being surrounded by people you trust, one of whom is your partner in life. What's your advice to people who aren't that lucky? I mean, there's, so much of competition is also figuring out who your allies are. And that's irrespective of whether or not it's a physical competition or a mental competition. How do you sort of make sure that you keep yourself and your energy above whatever is challenging you, above, whatever obstacles are coming from the outside? Because a lot of people aren't lucky enough, to have their life partner also at their right hand when they're trying to do their work.
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to remember is whenever you're going after some goal, some position or Olympic medals, it's all temporary. What we do and what we achieve is all temporary. So the biggest thing that I try to do is stay true to myself and go after goals in a way that I could be proud of at the end of the day. I believe in kindness. I'm a person who I never am a person who's going to hate on my competitors because, they're all out there working hard, doing the same thing I am, just trying to achieve their goals. I don't have any reason to hate them. I race the clock, even though I race them essentially on a timesheet. I'm racing the clock at any regard. So their ability to succeed or not to succeed has nothing to do with me. So I try to approach everything I do with a certain level of kindness and a certain level of grace for everyone around me. And that way, whether I win or lose, I can walk off the field at the end of the day and be proud of the efforts I've made. And yes, sometimes that means, I don't think I've sacrificed anything in terms of performance by making sure I'm a good person. But I do know, some other people would be like, oh, why are you sitting with a competitor at lunch? Or why are you doing these different things? Why are you offering to help people you're directly competing against? But I think it shows more of a person's character, how they compete and how they go after goals. So even if you're not surrounded by the most positive people in your life, you have an internal compass of how you want to approach things. And it's important to stay true to yourself. And remember that everything we do is temporary, but how you act and how you respond will leave a lasting legacy.
Talk to us about a time, and I've got an example that I'll throw out at you, but talk to us about a time where you had to really measure and watch your response because of something difficult that was happening. And I'll just throw out an instance that I know that you dealt with. There was, I think, a situation in the Olympics where a coach from another nation's team came at you with something racist. If you care to talk about that, I think it would be really helpful for people to hear about how you processed that.
So fortunately, it wasn't directly at the Olympics. These things tend to happen a little bit more a lead up to the Olympics, and that's exactly what happened with this. Is one of the coaches had made a disparaging remark about how black athletes can't drive, and black athletes don't belong in the front of the sled, and they actually said this to my face at one point as well. And it is one of those measured kind of things, because just reacting out and yelling at him isn't going to do me much good to dispel any negative stereotypes he has on me. Of course I want to be abrasive and just scream and all these kind of things, but it's not going to do anything to change the situation. And I've always lived by the mantra is like the best way I could do to change people's minds is to go out there and be myself and to perform as well as I can anyways. And that's exactly what I've always tried to do. As frustrating as it is, I've always known my entire life as a Black woman, there's going to be people in this world who don't like you just because of who you are before they even meet you. And so the best thing you can do is, like I said, is just stay true to yourself and recognize that because somebody doesn't like you before they even meet you, or they have these prejudgments or these stereotypes, that's something wrong with them. That's nothing wrong with you. And it is very hard to maintain your composure, but it's important. And there's a time and there's a place to, fight, and there's a time and a place to really be calculated in what you say and things like that. And I really believe, I've made measures to make these things known. I've made measures to make these things public, but yelling at him right there on the spot would not have been the image that I wanted to project.
And you've dealt with other situations because, again, it's important to point out that you compete in a sport that is not known for having lots of Black folks, certainly not lots of Black women. And I think that it's important to just talk about something that you said, which is that sometimes, even if the racism isn't overt, there are whole lots of folks who just don't think that, people who look like you and me belong in certain types of disciplines or fields. So let's try to make that experience meaningful for a young person who has to deal with that type of hostility and doesn't yet have, Elana, the, maturity, composure, presence of mind to say, I'm going to try to pull back from this idiocy and stay in my moment and stay in my game. How do we do a better job of communicating to younger people and maybe even older people, because it's a message for everybody? What's your advice for how to stay present and how to rise above somebody's aggression? Because look, it's very easy to say that racism is all about you. But when somebody comes at you like that, it is painful, it's hurtful, and it throws you off your game, I think, in a way that's different, from somebody just being mean. So what do you tell a 16-year-old who's facing a situation like that?
I think the difficult thing about the situation is you're just going to have to sit and have a hard talk with them. Yes, you want to, in the moment, respond, and you want to respond in the same way you're being attacked and meet that aggression with more aggression. But the reality of the situation is today, this day and age, we are still held at a different standard. And this is a conversation I was having with my husband the other day about raising our son now is there's going to be kids who pick on him. There's going to be kids who bully him or whatnot. And even as much as he might want to get in a fight or kids rough and tumble and stuff like that, he's going to be held to a higher standard as a Black man. He will be sent to jail in handcuffs if he puts his hands on somebody else or if he acts aggressively towards another person. We are still in that standard, and we are still in that time frame. Unfortunately, that's just where we are. So he doesn't have I say luxury. He doesn't have the luxury to act aggressively. So he has to know that there are consequences for his action, even if they're unfair. And that, yes, it's unfair that he's held to that standard, but that's the reality of the situation. So what I will do when I talk to young kids about this and stuff is just use a simple counting measure. When somebody comes at you, and which they inevitably will, it's a simple 5 count, simple 10 count, to take your breath and really slow things down. And that's the way you have to really approach it. You have to try and slow it down as much as possible so you can make sense of it without reacting too emotionally.
I think it's so interesting about the note, about slowing down, because you're in the field. I mean, that's not the only situation. You've talked about another incident dealing with a bobsled manufacturer who won't sell to Black bobsledders. I mean, it seems like it's almost normalized. Like there are some folks who aren't embarrassed to say, hey, Black lady, you don't belong here. I mean, just shameless. There's a shamelessness about it. You are taking these situations on, and as I understand it, you've kind of moved the ball forward to make sure that things like this are investigated. Talk to us about what you've done.
Yeah, so in bobsled, our sled technology is very important. When you look at bobsled, you watch it, it looks like all the sleds are the same, but they're very different. They're highly technicalized pieces of equipment, and they can make the difference between winning and losing a race. And it's a shame because if all the sleds were the same, like they are in a monobob competition, you would see drastically different outcomes. But the way it is now, before you even step online, some teams already have a significant advantage. And that's why having the fastest sled possible makes a world of difference. And so one of the sled manufacturers does produce one of the fastest sleds in the world, and he's not willing to sell to Black athletes. And, that does put us at a disadvantage. And one of the things I really wanted to do is call light to it. And, people want to say, there's racists out there, but they can't affect what you do. You could still rise above. And yes, that's true. I've been able to win medals and things without his sleds, but at the same time, I've also been at a disadvantage because I haven't had the opportunity to use the same amount of equipment as my white counterparts. And I thought it was very important to show that, yes, you might think, yes, he doesn't run the U.S. Bobsled Federation or anything like that. He's not choosing teams, but he does have an impact, and he does have an impact on results. So I called it out, and they did open an investigation. Now, it's largely hearsay, largely my word against his, and of course, he denied it and all these kind of things like that. So I don't expect the investigation to go much of anywhere, but at least calling it out, I think it was important because as an American athlete who was never going to use his sled anyways, I had a lot more freedom to kind of speak my mind on it. There are some athletes in federations whose federations rely on his sleds and rely on his equipment that didn't have the luxury of speaking out. So I felt it was important, at the very least, to make it more publicly known of what he was doing.
It seems so strange to me that a sport where winning isn't certainly part of winning is who's in the sled. You've won that, but part of winning has to do with the machine. And it's just strange to me that it's not standardized. I mean, I'm a big Formula One fan. All of the cars are different, but there are some rules, there are some standards about what makes a proper car. So in bobsled, like all the cars can be different. What's the standard?
There are standards, there are regulations, but of course, within those regulations, there end up being a wide variety of what you can actually do. And, people are always pushing the lines. The teams with more money are pushing those envelopes and pushing the lines to find the next big thing, or the thing that's really close to the border of the rules, but doesn't actually break the rules. And that just makes the sled go that much faster. So it's always an arms race as far as technology and sled technology.
You've competed against men. You've made history and broken barriers there. When you did that for the first time, were you nervous? Were you like, you know what, I better do really, really well, or it's going to set the cause back? Or, did you kind of not put that much pressure on yourself?
I was extremely nervous, not in the least because I just wanted to go out there and show that women could drive these sleds. And just from the fact that there weren't going to be many women doing it. The many women's federations weren't going to be supportive, and I knew I had an opportunity. So when I first had a race where I raced for me, and there were women all along the lines having posters and things like that, cheering me on and supporting me, encouraging me, saying women can do it and all this kind of stuff. So of course it was a little nerve wracking, but at the same time, for me, it was an opportunity, and I felt like it was an opportunity worth going for. And even if I fell flat on my face, I felt that it was important enough to the next group of girls that I at least try and see what happens. And fortunately, when you are willing to go out there and give all of yourself, good things happen. And I think that's what I was honestly able to go out there and do, and give everything I had. And fortunately, it paid off.
You've become such an important, potent figure, not just in bobsled and sport generally, but just for a lot of the work you've done toward inclusion and opening up sport for women. You didn't even, however, plan to be a bobsledder at the outset. It was kind of, you went in a different direction. You wanted to be a softball player, but that didn't work out. So you ended up here. Tell us about that and why you made that change.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I just wanted to be an Olympian, and I was going to do whatever it took to get there. And I decided that at the age of 9. Now, at the age of 9, I don't think I knew really what that meant, but I decided I was going to be an Olympian, so I had to make it happen. So I grew up playing a lot of different sports: softball, basketball, soccer, track and field, you name it, I played it. And then went on to college and played softball there, and then played professionally as well, all with the intention of going to the Olympics. And so when I finally got my Olympic tryout for the softball team, I was so nervous and so jacked up, and I thought this was going to be my shot. And I knew because softball was going to be taken out of the games, this was going to be my last shot. So I put so much pressure on myself and just had the worst tryout in the history of tryouts. Like, it was so bad. It was terrible. So I wasn't going to make the Olympic softball team, but my parents had seen bobsled on TV, and they saw that it could be an opportunity for me from transitioning to bobsled to still live my Olympic dream. Because bobsled, they look for strong, fast, powerful athletes, and those were my strengths in softball. So they're like, hey, why don't you try this? I Googled it, emailed the coach, and got invited to a tryout.
Do you, as you look back on your career, is there anything that you regret? Anything you're like, you know what? I wish I had done that. I wish I had done this differently. I wish I had, whatever it might be. Anything that you wish you would have done differently?
I wish I would have taken a more active role in some athlete leadership positions earlier on in my career. Early in my bobsled career, I was pretty shy and, didn't really know where I fit in and stuff like that. And it wasn't until after I won my first bronze medal that I really felt like I could step out and take more of an active role in athlete issues. But I was passionate about it ever since college. In college, my coach that abused the team and was fired during the middle of the season. And after that point, I really became involved in athlete activism and stuff like that. So I really wish I maybe started that transition earlier in my career. And I wish it wasn't a circumstance where it took me winning an Olympic medal in order to bring that out of me. So hopefully now more athletes who haven't, it shouldn't take a athlete winning an Olympic medal to say, hey, these are the things that can be changed, or these are the things that could be made better so athletes can win more medals. It shouldn't take you winning a medal already to kind of feel like you have the ability to make those statements. So hopefully now we're encouraging more and more athletes to speak out and to step up.
You said that you worked with a coach who was abusive to the team. What type of abuse?
Mental, and I guess it's considered mental, emotional. I guess it's considered physical abuse, just because of, the running till exhaustion and the lack of water breaks and the, competing through injuries and threatening our scholarships. So you had to compete through injuries and those types of things. So all encompassing, really.
What's the line, Elana? What's the line? Because certainly we have seen and continue to hear more about coaches and trainers who cross it. But we also know that for those of you who are Olympians, who are champions, you're going to push yourself very likely harder than I'm going to push myself physically. I mean, it is the discipline, and part of winning is being pushed just beyond the point, I think, right, where you think you're done. Winning is when you go that extra. But what's the line look like? What's the line? What's the difference between being pushed beyond where you think you can go and winning, and really being abused? Try to explain for us, if you can, the distinction.
For me, it really felt like that mental and emotional component that came with it. There's one thing of, whether it's softball playing, and yes, we got to run a couple extra laps to push that kind of fitness and things like that. But there's a whole nother thing when you're being told you're slow, you're out of shape, you're never going to win, you're going to do these kind of things with that kind of language behind it. That kind of changes the tone of it. And I think the biggest signal for us, the softball teams routinely have 20 athletes. At the time the coach ended up being fired, this is a Division I collegiate softball team who started out with 20 athletes. And at the time the coach was fired, we only had 9. To have that kind of rate of people quitting the team and things like that, that should be a red flag to any administration that something clearly isn't right there. I think when coaches do things that intentionally put their athletes in harm's way, forcing to play with injuries, forcing them to do things against their best interests. That's at the point where you're no longer trying to push the athlete to be a better athlete. You're trying to serve some other agenda. And, I won't attempt to get in her mind and what was going on in her mind during those times. But, it does cross a line when an athlete is leaving the field day after day feeling like there's no way they can continue this way. There's no way they can go on. And it just becomes so much of a more mental toll than the physical sport should be. And at the end of the day, yes, I'm going out there and winning medals, but it's sport. It's children's games. I slide down a hill for a living. It's a child's game. Anybody could do it. Yes, maybe not at the elite level, but I could teach anyone who can drive a car how to drive a bobsled. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. And when it gets to the point where coaches take that way too far, they put winning above everything else, the fact that we are playing children's games, then it becomes really dangerous.
Talk to us about what it feels like to win an Olympic medal for your country. Describe the sensation, because most of us will never know it, of standing there on the podium while they hang a medal and suggest that you, a representative of the United States of America, are one of the 3 best in the world in your sport. What's that feeling like?
Yeah, it is one of the most incredible feelings in the world. It's really even hard to put into words because it's something you've worked for your entire life. So many people have sacrificed so much to help you get there. And there's so much joy and so much perspective in that one moment. What you've overcome to get there. What it took in that moment to get there, between those 2 days of competition. There's so much going on through your head. Like I said, it's really hard to put into words and to know that you're representing your country. Even the U.S. with all its faults, with all, its history and stuff, I still love this country and I still am honored to be able to compete for them. So to be able to represent the country and to represent millions of Americans going out there and working to make this country a better place, it really is the honor of a lifetime.
And you are representing in a way that is opening up the idea of sport to folks who perhaps once upon a time didn't think that bobsled was for them. Do you think that you have made a difference to young women who now might consider competing in that sport as opposed to something else? Has your being there kind of shaped the perception? I know you're going to be really lovely and modest and say no, but I'm going to hazard a guess and say that this is yet another situation where representation matters. That's actually a hashtag that's more than a cliche. I think it's a real thing. But how do you feel like being one of very few Black women to be competing? And what do you think it means for young women seeing you?
Well, it has been incredible. And I think I have been successful in one thing in inspiring more Black and people of color to come out to bobsled, more Black athletes and people of color to come out to bobsled. And I know that because, they'll come up to me and tell me and say, hey, I saw you in the 2010 games. And I was like, oh, I've been doing this way too long. If you were in elementary school watching me in the 2010 games and now you're competing against me, this is crazy. And so they'll tell me that, I encourage them to get a bobsled or that's why they're here and stuff like that. So it's been really cool to see that transformation, but it's also one of those double-edged sword kind of things because of my success and stuff. The field is has gotten much more competitive. So it's gotten much harder to win those medals. More and more people are trying out bobsled and giving it a go. So not only has the U.S. team gotten more difficult to beat internationally, the fact that we're having more diversity in people trying the sport, we're seeing talent, and we're seeing more and more people just come out of nowhere and be successful. So it is like a double-edged sword in that way. It's getting much harder for me as I age to compete with these young kids coming out. So it's a good problem to have, though. I welcome it.
Age smage. It is funny, though, when you think about being in a sport like a winter sport, there were all of these weird rumors that they used to say about Black folks and what we could and couldn't do. Like once upon a time, I won't name names, but I was actually on a show where there were different panelists. And this guy, this is years ago, over a decade, and he was kind of like, Black people can't really swim, the muscles, the musculature. Like, they say these really racist things and then dress it up using terms that sound scientific. I've heard like Black folks can't ski. If anybody ever thought Black folks couldn't bobsled, you've certainly debunked that. But your being there I think it makes a big difference to people. Something else that makes a difference is your work with the Women's Sports Foundation. You are president. Tell us about the work of the foundation and what you're doing to open up sport for women and make it more equitable.
Yeah, so I had the honor of serving as president in 2019, and now I'm on the board of trustees. And so our organization just basically works to provide opportunities for all girls, all women in all different types of sports. And we really feel like sport, and we know that sport is a vehicle to greater opportunities. A lot of people see, oh, it's just a sport. Why would you want to get your kid involved in this or stuff like that? But we know 96% of women in the C-suite have a sporting background. And that's too hard. That's too big of a statistic to ignore. So when you know that women who go on to achieve high levels of success have a sporting background, it's like, why isn't every girl in sport? Why aren't we making this mandatory that every girl's in sport? Because we know it leads to greater outcomes. And so we just work to make sure every girl has an opportunity, and there's a sport out there for everybody. A lot of people are like, well, I'm not the fastest or I'm not the strongest or stuff, but there's tons of different sports. And our job is to give people opportunities and show what's possible.
96% of women in the C-suite. For my viewers and listeners, that refers to executive, women executives. 96%?
96. It's staggering.
Oh my God, everybody needs to go pick up a ball or go do something now. I feel like we need to start right now. That's an incredible statistic. Why do you think that is? Is it the drive to compete on the playground makes you more driven in the corporate battleground? Is there some correlation there, do you think?
Well, I think the distinction is, we didn't say all of them were very competitive in sport or whatever. It's the participation in sport. It's the things that sport teaches you, that teamwork, that camaraderie, but also how to set goals, how to go after goals. And as I mentioned, we're not talking about all the women in the C-suite who have this sporting background. They weren't Olympic medalists, obviously, or anything like that. Some of them were just played Little League growing up, or just participated in ran in their local track and maybe did laps or stuff like that. So it doesn't take a certain level of being in sport in order to glean the benefits. And that's why we just encourage participation for everybody, because of the different things it teaches. And also we know that people who engage in sport are more likely to be physically healthy, and physical health is tied to mental health. And so if we can keep people healthier, the likelihood that they're able to achieve more is much greater. You're
the mother of a special needs boy. Talk to us about raising a son. You and your husband are both competitors. You're raising a young boy with special needs. Talk to us about being a mom to your young boy.
Oh my gosh. My son, Nico, is the best. And I think one of the things, when I decided to start a family, or we decided to start a family, it was really at a point in our careers that we knew if it meant bobsled was over, we were okay with that. And so we decided to start our family anyways. And fortunately, we've been able to continue our sporting career and be a mom. And, continue to win medals. So it's been a crazy journey. Even with his special needs, he has Down syndrome and profound hearing loss. We've been able to work on his therapies on the road. We've been able to manage his doctor's appointments and everything he needs throughout this entire time. Whether we're traveling or whether we're here back in Atlanta, we've been able to work it all out. And it's been a huge blessing. And I feel like one of the greatest gifts I've been able to give him is just being able to be out there and be seen and being able to travel the world, because I know, there's not a lot of visibility among people of color with disabilities. And so if I could help him have that visibility, if I can share the world with him and share him with the world, I know it's going to help, us continue to fight for more inclusivity.
What's next for you? You've done a lot. You're doing a lot. What's coming up?
That is $1 million question. So I know there's more bobsledding in my future. Whether that will lead me to the 2026 games, it's too early to tell. It's hard as an athlete. Usually, one way or another, as soon as you walk off from that previous Olympics, whether or not you're going to commit 4 years. But I think this year, where I am in life, we're just going to take it 1 year at a time and see what happens. Right now, I'm just enjoying being a mom and doing some light activity and getting back into training a little bit. But really, just taking every day as it comes and waiting to see what's next for me.
I bet your view of light activity is very different from that of the rest of us. Her light activity is like, I did 5 miles before breakfast. Elana, you are just a joy. You're a treasure. You're not just a competitor and you're not just a winner on the hill, but you're really a winner in life. And you're doing wonderful things to make sport more diverse and more inclusive, and to remind everybody just about what being a part of a team can do for all of us. So thank you very much for being here, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.